I really wish if I had a crystal ball or a way to change things, my goal would really be to get people to think ahead, right? To think about these things in advance so that when the crisis happens, you and all your family members are prepared versus that sort of crisis panic.
Welcome to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast, the show where we hold space for real stories, expert insights, and the emotional truth of caregiving. I am your host, Talisa Angel Garcia. Before we start, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to support our mission of honoring caregivers and connecting families with the guidance they deserve. On today's episode, we're honored to welcome Dr. Corinne Auman, a nationally recognized gerontologist with over 20 years of experience working closely with older adults and their families. She is the author of Keenagers, telling a new story about aging and a powerful voice for changing how we think about growing older in America. Dr. Auman holds a PhD in developmental psychology from NC State University and is a nationally certified guardian, certified senior advisor, and advanced professional member of the Aging Life Care Association. From caregiving and education to healthcare advocacy and age bias, Dr. Auman brings a multifaceted lens to aging that is both compassionate and deeply practical. Today, she's sharing wisdom every adult child needs to hear, which is how to care for aging parents while also caring for yourself. So settle in. This is the episode that could shift the way you see aging. I'm very excited to have Dr. Corinne Auman on today, and we're just going to dive right into it. Dr. Corinne, please tell me, how did you get started along this journey?
Yeah, so I think myself, like a lot of people who go into the aging field, I got started because of a terrific relationship with older adults. When I was growing up, we lived right next door to my grandparents, and so I was very close with them and adored them. And I think that relationship really showed me the value and the joy of being around older people, and that's how I got into the aging field.
That's awesome. So tell me more about that dynamic.
Well, I mean, I think most people, if you ask them about their grandparents, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I love my grandparents," right? They were terrific. And yet, when you ask people about just older adults in general, somehow they'll say, "No, I don't like old people. The only old people they like are their grandparents," right? But no, so I grew up right next door to them, really had a terrific relationship. Um, when I was in eighth grade, my grandfather passed away kind of suddenly. Like he got sick, and then it just wasn't very long before he passed away. And when that happened, my mom and her sister realized very quickly that my grandmother had dementia. And my grandfather had been doing such a good job of protecting her and taking care of her that they really had no idea how bad it was until after he passed away. And so it almost felt like they got thrown into caregiving overnight, because they went from, we have two parents who are alive and who are doing okay, to our dad passes away, and now suddenly we have a mom who needs 24/7 care. She could not be left alone. That's what they realized. And that journey that I kind of watched them go on, where they were trying to navigate this caregiving, figure out what to do. And I just remember thinking at the time, like, this is really dumb. Why isn't there somebody who helps you figure these things out, that helps you find the resources and do all those pieces along the way? And so that's what really got me into the field I'm in now.
That's awesome. So that's a memory that you had of your grandparents and something that you just kept in your heart and decided to pursue and help out with.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Okay, so in your field, And while you've been out there working, are there any stories that really resonated with you along your journey?
Oh, I mean, so I'm in care management now, and care management is basically helping adult children, typically adult children, sometimes spouses as well, navigate the caregiving journey. So a typical client for me is a phone call where somebody calls and they go, everything was fine until, and then you fill in whatever the event is, and now they need to know everything there is to know about senior care, right? They don't know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. They don't know what different types of living situations are out there. They don't know how do you hire a home care agency? What is a home care agency? What are the differences in the different kinds of home care agencies that are out there? How is home health different than home care? And so just the plethora of things that exist that most of us don't think about until we are thrown into that moment of, oh no, something has happened to someone I love. So now I'm upset, right? And now I need to know everything about senior care and their finances. How do we pay for this? Just all these things all at once. So, without getting into the specifics of any particular client, I would say that is the typical story that comes in my door. And I mean, and that's coming in my door, almost every day. I really wish if I had a crystal ball or a way to change things, you know, my goal would really be to get people to think ahead, right? To think about these things in advance so that when the crisis happens, you and all your family members are prepared versus that sort of crisis panic. What do we do now?
What you said really resonated with me because I was one of the people that happened to. Like everything was fine, and then my mother kept having issues with blood clots because that runs in the family, and she kept having issues with blood clots in her lungs. She would end up having to go to the hospital for this, very serious. And so finally they ran a test to see if anything else was going on, and then it was boom, breast cancer, and boom, stage 4 breast cancer, and there is no stage 5. So now I was just thrown into the space of, what do I do? Because I was going to be a caregiver for my mother, which I was, but there was so many different components to this, like you said, all at the same time, like finances. She's working. Do I move her down south? What do I, all of these things all at one time, and it was so incredibly just overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was the first one out of my friends to lose a parent, I was the first one to care for a parent, to have a parent deal with a terminal illness. I was the first. So there was no one that I could even like lean on
Right.
that could guide me through. So thinking about that, what are some of the things and some of the steps that a caregiver or a potential caregiver as an adult can take to help prepare them?
Sure. So, there are some basic things that everyone should have in place. And I mean everyone. From the moment you turn 18, you should have in place a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney right from the beginning. My son just turned 18 back in April. We're now in June. 5 days after he turned 18, we had him at the attorney's office filling out the healthcare power of attorney and financial power of attorney. So sometimes people think these documents are things that old people do, and I'm putting that in quotes, but really these are documents that adults do, period. Because once you turn 18, your parents are no longer in charge of your health care or your finances. You have to say who you want to be in charge. So everybody should have these documents. The healthcare power of attorney is a document that says, this is the person I want to make my healthcare decisions if I cannot speak for myself. So it doesn't give them the right to take over your healthcare while you are cognizant and fully awake and everything's fine, right? But it gives them the ability to speak for you if you aren't able to speak for yourself. So if heaven forbid any of us, go out and get in a car accident and we're in a coma, who's going to speak for you in that moment, and do they know what you would actually want? Do they know if you would want a feeding tube? Do they know if you'd want to live with a tracheotomy for the rest of your life? Like, what are the things that you would want or not want? And again, we think about this being something that old people have to talk about, but no, all of us should be talking about it. The same thing is true for finances. You need to do a financial power of attorney so that someone can take over your finances if you are not able to do it any longer. And one of the mistakes I see people do all the time is they kind of just put off completing these documents. They go, oh, I'll do it when it's time. The time is now. Because we also, in my care management practice, we do guardianship. So, like, I can be appointed the guardian of the person for people if there's nobody else to do it. And many times we are appointed guardian simply because that individual never did a healthcare power of attorney. And now they have dementia or something else has happened and they are not able to speak for themselves. And because they never said who they wanted to have be in charge, I get appointed by the courts to be in charge. So the way to avoid having guardianship come into play is to do your power of attorney documents. The way to get what you want as you grow older is by doing those documents, right? So telling someone, hey, this is the kind of healthcare I would want. Telling someone, hey, here are the financial accounts and this is what the money should be used for. Pay for me to be in this really nice place, right? Like those kinds of things. And I think that's the number one thing, because it can save families so much time, energy, and stress if you've done those documents and had the discussions around them too, right? Don't just appoint somebody to those positions and not tell them. That is bad, right? Like don't appoint your son or daughter or your brother or sister to be the healthcare power of attorney and then not tell them. You want to make sure that these are conversations that you're actually having.
That's really great information. Podcast family, we need to become more comfortable with talking about aging and everything that comes along with it, and how to be there in the way that our loved ones wants us to be there. Sometimes it's like a taboo in the culture, like they don't want to talk about it because that's, kind of speaking negatively or talking about death. It's not necessarily talking about death, but it's making sure that you have a plan set in place. Just like Dr. Corinne said, if anything happens, you'll already be set. And so if you are that healthcare power of attorney you were talking about, it's important to know what your loved ones would want.
And I think you're 100% right. There's a lot of people who are very uncomfortable talking about these things because they almost think it's like speaking it into existence, right? Like if I talk about death, then it's going to like bring it. The thing I want to say about that is that these documents, these kinds of preparations, they're not actually about your death. They're about protecting and preparing the living so that in the case that something happens, which we are all aging, we are all going to meet that moment, right, of passing away, but these documents are about protecting the people that you love and preparing them so that they can do the very best by you if you aren't able to speak for yourself, and that they also know what you want and what to do so that they're not stressed, so that they're not arguing. That's the other thing I see all the time is the families who are fighting about what they think their loved one wants. I think mom would want a feeding tube, keep her alive at all costs, and the sibling says absolutely not, she would never want to live that way. And so it's all this fighting and stress that could have been avoided if we had had some discussion about it and prepared. So it's really an act of love. I mean, it totally is an act of love for your family to do these things.
Yes, and that's, again, just very well said. And I resonate with that because I've seen and also had my own experience with it. And to your point, if you have something in writing, that's what can be honored, because you can still have a situation where a loved one or a parent says, hey, this is what I want. And you think everyone is clear on it because it was communicated, but then end up still having some discord with family members because that's not what they want for their mother or their father, their loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take out the time and just do exactly as Dr. Corinne has just stated, you won't have to go through that because it'll already be said and done. It'll be in writing, and everyone will know what we're going to follow, what needs to be followed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. A question regarding guardianship. I know you said that you've had to step in and act as the guardian in various situations due to not having certain documentation. While being in that role, have you experienced clients that maybe come to you of that person and say, well, this is what needs to happen, or my loved one wanted this? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, so, as the guardian, you are the ultimate decision maker at that point because nobody, and because usually when there is a guardianship, family members are asked first, right? They're asked to step up and become the guardian. And if they can't or won't for some reason, that's when I would get appointed. So typically, I will listen to the family members, and take everybody's wants and needs into account, but ultimately the guardian's going to make the best decision. The guardian of the person, which is the person who makes all the like healthcare decisions and like where somebody lives, that sort of stuff, will then make decisions in coordination with the financial guardian, and of course with any medical providers and things like that. But see, that's one of the reasons you want to avoid guardianship, because they don't have to listen to your family. Their family can the family once somebody's under guardianship, it's like I'm that person's parent at that point and can make those kinds of decisions. So you really want to avoid that if possible. And I'll be honest with you, several, not all the time, but many times guardianships come about because the family members are fighting, because they cannot agree on what they think is best for that individual. And so because the family members are all fighting, that's when the courts have to step in and say, okay, you guys can't figure it out. We're going to put somebody else in charge.
Wow, that's really good information to have and to share. Podcast family, it'll also help to create peace while you're going through something that could be considered very devastating and emotional. That's great information. Another question that I have for you, after you have like all of the paperwork in order, what would you say is the next step that caregivers, as a best practice, should consider?
So if you've done your powers of attorney and you've done your will, obviously, then once you and like a advanced directives, that would be the other one. Advanced directives say, I would want this kind of treatment. I would not want that kind of treatment, so that it makes it very clear. Once you have all those kinds of things done, I think the next really important piece is, again, having discussions with your family members so that they know what you want. They also know where the documents are, right? Do not complete the documents and then lock them in a safety deposit box or in a safe or something where nobody has access to them. Because if there is an emergency and they need to step in, they have to have access to the documents. They need to have their own copies. They need to know where they are in your house so that they can just go and grab them and they've got them. But then, having those discussions, revisiting the discussions every year or two, I think is also really important. So maybe today you are full code. You want all the treatment, you want all the things, do everything to keep me alive. But maybe in 5 years, you've had a diagnosis of some kind and your health has really changed, and you may look at the situation completely differently. So, continuing the discussion as time passes, as things change, I think is super important to keep on top of it. If you did your documents 10 years ago, probably should revisit them, make sure that they're still correct, those kinds of things. The other thing that I think is super important is just kind of thinking of, if you are the older adult, thinking about what your options are, because 7 out of 10 of us are going to need some form of long-term care at some point. Maybe that's home care, maybe that's moving into a facility of some kind, but 7 out of 10, 70% of us are going to need some form of long-term care. And what I see people do is just kind of ignore that. And everyone seems to go into their older adult years with the approach of, that's not really going to happen to me. I'm just going to pass away warm in my bed and everything will be fine. And again, the reality is 70% of us will need some form of long-term care. So, educating yourself about what the options are and what they cost, so that you can have some preparation for, okay, I really want to stay at home. What does home care cost if I need it? Is this an age-friendly house? If there are 20 stairs to get in any door of the house, that is not an age-friendly house. So do we need to move? Do we need to downsize? Do we need to remodel? Right? Do I have a bathroom that I could get a walker or a wheelchair into if I needed it? So I see all the time people go, oh, I'm going to stay at home. I'm going to stay at home. And that's great if your house is age friendly. But if it's not, and many older homes are not, they have narrow hallways and narrow doors and, big bathtubs and things that are just not great for older people. So if that's the case, we want to think about that ahead of time, right? You want to downsize or remodel while you're still healthy and active and you don't really need that accessible shower. You don't want to wait until you already needed it and now we're having to remodel. Those kinds of things.
That's interesting you say that, because I was literally just having a conversation with someone about their loved one who they had just gotten a different house and they were moving their loved one down to be with them so that they could take care of them. And they said they can't even make it into the bathroom with their walker. And they talked about just what you just said, like the hallways are too narrow and then they have stairs and just simple things that you don't necessarily think about.
Right.
But this is really important because it's not until you actually are thrown into it, as we stated earlier, that you start to realize all of these things that you need to consider. So being able to get in front of the ball when it comes to things like this will be very important. Podcast family, this is exciting. So Dr. Corinne is an activist. She handles caregiving through case management, and she is also an author. I like to get into more about that in terms of your books that you've written.
So one of them's here behind me, if you're seeing the video, Keenagers. And the point of my books, like the subtitle of my book, is telling a new story about aging. And it's a very pro-aging book, the pro-aging approach. And people sometimes kind of look at me sideways and they go, okay, you're in care management and you're dealing with families when they are in crises and things have gone wrong and maybe aging isn't going so well because there are problems. And yet you've also written this very pro-aging, let's talk positively, let's think positively about aging book. And the reason that has come about, so I've been doing care management for like 13 years now, and a couple of things have happened. Number one, I realized that when I started my business, I thought I was going to be working with 40-year-olds who were caring for 70-year-old parents. And what I'm actually doing a lot of the time is working with 70-year-olds who are caring for 90-something-year-old parents. And so my perception of what aging was like and who the older adult was really wrong, really inaccurate. And I think most of society has it wrong too, because we're all kind of thinking, oh, 70's downhill, and it's all downhill from there and that sort of thing. And I got 70-year-olds who are still working and volunteering and starting new businesses and doing all kinds of things while also caring for their 95-year-old parents. So that shift in perspective is one of the things I talk about in the book, that we all need to start thinking about older adulthood differently. It's much longer now. We have many, many more years of longevity. So when Social Security was first put into place in the 1930s, the average lifespan was around 67. You got Social Security at 65, right? We really only anticipated you being around for another couple of years. And today, if you got Social Security at 65, you're probably, the average lifespan is like 76, 77. And many people are living into their 80s, 90s, and beyond. So now, instead of a couple of years of retirement, you're looking at a couple of decades of retirement. So we really have to shift how we are approaching this. Like, when you think about retirement, it shouldn't just be, do I have enough money, which is very important, of course. It should also be, I'm going to have this long time period to have a spiritual life, a physical life, emotional life, social life, just all of these different pieces that make you a complete person, of course, right? But that I need to plan for those. We really shouldn't be thinking about these years as, okay, I'm going to retire and withdraw and just go, do my hobbies and play with my grandchildren. We should be thinking about, who am I going to be now, right? Like, what is my purpose? What's going to give me meaning? What's going to get me excited to get out of bed on a Wednesday morning? So that's how we got here. I also see that people who are excited about growing older, they do all the planning that you and I just talked about, because they're looking forward to these years and they want them to go really well. They want to be prepared. And so when you have a positive outlook, you aren't scared the way so many people are scared. And then they don't want to talk about it or plan for it or prepare.
As I was listening to you, I was thinking about how, typically speaking, we prepare for other chapters in our life, but not this chapter.
Mm-mm.
When you're a small child, you have your parents talking to you about school and education, and you start to get older, you start thinking about college, and you start thinking about, well, what do I want to do? Well, what do I want to study? Then that turns into, what do I want to be? Where do I see myself after I graduate? Where do I want to work? How do I want to climb up this ladder on corporate America, or do I want to have my own business? And that turns into family. But I never really hear people talk about this stage in their lives.
Right. Because it's only very recently that it is this nice long stage. I mean, it's within the last 100 years that we've gotten this extra time. And so we don't really know what to do with it. And you see these people retirees who don't know what to do with it. They retire and they think, woo, retirement's going to be great. And about 18 months later, they're kind of going, well, this is what I'm going to do for the next 2 or 3 decades. And so that's when they're going back and trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do now? But we do not provide a good roadmap at all, because just like you said, think about college. Think how much college prep stuff we do with kids to say, get you ready for college, pick a college, do all the things. And that's just 4 years. Retirement can be decades, and we don't do anything other than say, thank you very much. It's been great. We don't really need you anymore. Go off into the sunset. And it's kind of ridiculous, honestly, given our longevity now. It's such a tremendous missed opportunity for both individuals to think about, ooh, who would I like to be now, right? Like, what's my next iteration of myself going to be? But it's also a tremendous missed opportunity for society in general, because if we, the way we talk about aging is very negative. And we don't even have a lot of positive words for aging, which is why I use the word Keenagers, because I was trying to come up with something positive to describe older adults. And keen means highly developed or having a really strong interest in something. And I think that's who older adults are today, not codgers and old coots and hags and, just these words. If you just go Google these words, it's ridiculous what the
Yes,
way we describe
yes.
it.
I live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and it is podcast family. It's a great retirement place. That's why, in part, I'm still here because when my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, I was just like, okay, I wanted to leave because I'm like, I'm a millennial and I'm in a retirement place.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I said, well, this would be something good for my mother. So that's how I ended up staying as long as I have. But when I tell you, I would tell my mom, I said, I've never seen anything like this before in my life because I would tell her, I said, Mom, I see people your age and up. They're at the House of Blues. They're at the bars. They're going bar hopping. They're out here dancing, doing all of the line dances. They are just out here living their best lives. They're dating.
They're being people.
Right.
They're being normal, whole, complex, complete people, which is not how we think about older adults at all.
Exactly. And it really changed the narrative because you would think, okay, well, they get older and they'll go to a senior citizen home or something like that. But I tell you what, the majority of my neighbors in my neighborhood are retired. They're in great shape. They go out, to your point, like they have their quality of life is just rich.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a beautiful thing. And so that your book is right in alignment with what's actually happening with what I have been seeing for 13 years living here.
Yep.
In the Carolinas.
And I think we should all think of ourselves as teenagers in training, right?
Mhm.
That's who I want to be. I want to be somebody who's highly developed, who has strong interest in life, and has hobbies and passions and things that I want to do all throughout those years. And yeah, but you think about like the stereotypes, kind of the story our culture tells about aging. It's not telling that Myrtle Beach story. It's telling it's all downhill and it's all terrible, and make sure you use all the anti-aging creams so that you can't show your age at all. And it's like, no, there's so much to look forward to if you plan and you prepare, and you don't just bury your head in the sand and go, it's not happening to me.
Right. I agree with that 100%. And I love this conversation that we're having because podcast family, what I'm getting from this is twofold. Of course, getting in front of the ball as it pertains to our loved ones and making sure that the documentation, everything is set and we have a plan in place. However, it's also important for us, and I think about us, Gen Xers, millennials, the Gen Zs, it's also important for us to start thinking about that chapter of our lives as well, because generally speaking, we don't. We put so much emphasis and so much thought and planning into every other area and time span of our lives except for that part. And I will add this. I remember talking to my therapist once and we were just talking and I said, well, I was curious about like the demographic that my therapist would have. My therapist shared with me that they would also see a lot of clients who were just, let's say, retiring.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would retire and just exactly what you said, they took off work, etc. And they're like, well, what more is there to life than this? And they would get depressed because they hadn't thought about that part at this time in their lives. And so she would work with them, my therapist would work with them on that stage of their life. So this is how important it is.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it's all coming together because that was a conversation I had years ago with her. And I couldn't even phantom, like, well, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm retired, that means I'm free. But then I even thought about that standpoint. What would I do if I was retired? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's important to have a game plan for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you for that.
Well, and you need, because once you retire, you still need social connections. You still need intellectual stimulation. I mean, your brain is a use it or lose it organ. And if you aren't doing things that you find interesting and challenging that is not good for your brain. And a lot of people get so much of their socialization from work, and then once you retire and you're not going to work anymore, okay, who are you talking to? How are you getting your social interactions? Where's that? And so, I think we kind of assume, or we've been told, that you'll retire and it'll be bliss and it'll just all sort of work itself out. And what people find is that it doesn't just work itself out. You actually have to make an effort and plan and figure out, okay, what do I want to do now? And where am I going to get my socialization? Like, what am I going to do with all this time? Freedom is a great thing. Like, it's wonderful to like have a week off from work and go relax and have a vacation. But when you have nothing but free time and nobody really seems to need you for anything, no appointments, no nothing, that's when you end up in the therapist's office trying to figure out what to do next. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. I just feel like everything has just come full circle, and just the importance, like you said, of even having activities and being social. I do play golf. I'm in a golf league, and one of our oldest members is 80 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. She's in good health and she plays golf. It's just a really great space that I'm in and a part of. Living where I live has really opened my eyes to that and has changed my perspective because of what I see on a daily basis. I even see, even working out, and I don't know, just I have literally, podcast family, I have literally on some of my personal social media platforms, I have told people, to the ladies, I said, to the women who are divorced and or widowed in this age bracket that want to date, I said, you all need to check out where I live, because I've never seen anything like this before in my life. I said, I'm like, you can meet a good man at the gym, like a senior at the gym, working out, wherever you go, at the grocery store, and I'm like, they're everywhere. I've never seen anything like this before in my life.
So
So
you've got
yeah.
some really good role models in front of
Hmm.
you. You've got so many people showing you what's possible. And I think when people don't interact with older adults on a day-to-day basis, they don't see it, and they don't have those role models in front of them the way you do. And that's part of, in the book, I tell a lot of stories. Like, I did a lot of interviews with people, and that's part of what I'm trying to give you is like, here are the people to show you how it's done, right? to give you something to aspire to, because we all need that, right? Like, we need to see it, and you're surrounded by it every day because you're going, oh, this is going to be great. I can, well into my 80s, and I'm going to be at the gym and line dancing and doing all the things. And seeing that is so powerful for counteracting the negative version that we get so often.
Yes, I agree with that. And then also, I do realize that a lot of people don't see what I'm able to see on a daily basis. So having your book where you've done your research and you've interviewed and you created a great book for people to read. And I highly recommend that everyone check out Keenagers Telling a New Story About Aging, and it's by Dr. Corinne Auman, PhD. Check this book out because it's twofold. If you're in a space where you are retiring and you're wondering what's next, this book can help you. And then also, I think about my demographic, for an example, like millennials. I do think about Gen Xers, etc. Before we get to that stage, this is something that we actually need to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And this book is going to provide great information and stories and background. So please check this book out. Now, where can we find your book?
So you can find it on Amazon. If you go to my website, which is just CorinneAuman.com, there's links to the book there. But you can also order it off Barnes & Noble. They probably don't have it in your local bookstore, but you can order it from them online.
Okay, awesome. And podcast family, I'm going to have Dr. Corinne's information in the description of the podcast. So wherever you stream your podcast, whether that's on Audible or Spotify, or if you decide to watch on YouTube, which you should watch on YouTube so you can see what her book looks like in the background and you can see Dr. Auman. The information will also be there as well. Thank you, Dr. Corinne. This has been just a very insightful and helpful conversation. I know personally some close loved ones of mine that I'm going to have this discussion with, and I'm also going to recommend that they watch this podcast, this specific episode, because this is something that will help them.
I hope so. That's the mission.
Yes. So thank you again for coming on and being a guest. We sincerely appreciate you and your time on today. And thank you to the podcast family for tuning in. Remember to share, remember to like, and also subscribe for more. Awesome. Thank you.